to Deep Sleep Stories. Thank you to everyone who's been listening. If these stories help you relax or fall asleep, a short review, comment, or sharing the podcast with someone who might benefit is a simple and meaningful way to support the show so that we may continue to offer it for free. Now, take a slow, gentle breath and let's begin tonight's story.
Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories, a quiet little corner where the night becomes soft. And tonight you will drift into a tale about a tiny bakery that opens only at midnight, just in time for warm cinnamon rolls to meet the stars. You can let yourself get comfortable now. Feel the weight of your body settling into whatever is holding you. Let your shoulders grow heavy. Let your jaw unclench. If your hands are curled or tense, allow them to loosen, to soften, to rest. Gently draw in a slow breath through your nose, a calm, steady breath. Imagine you are filling your lungs with cool, clear night air. Hold it for a moment at the top, and then let it sigh out longer than it came in. If it feels good, do that again. Slow breath in, slow breath out. Each exhale carrying away the day, the noise, the lists, the shoulds, the worries that try to linger. As you breathe, picture the world outside your window growing quieter, lights dimming, streets emptying, the sky deepening into a velvety blue that leans toward night. Somewhere inside that vast, peaceful dark, a small glow appears, like a lantern in the distance, like a shop window lit just for you. Let your thoughts wander gently toward that glow. You do not need to follow it, just watch it from far away. Your body rests here, safe and still, while your mind is free to drift, easy and unhurried, into the story that waits. And now, as you sink deeper into comfort, imagine another someone in that distant place, in a quiet town under a sleepy sky. Their night is only beginning, and the story of the midnight bakery unfolds around them like rising dough. In a small town, tucked between gentle hills and a slow winding river, there was a cobblestone street that felt different after dark. During the day, it was ordinary enough, lined with shops and flower boxes and bikes leaning against lampposts. But at night, when most windows went dark and curtains were drawn, the street fell under a softer kind of magic. On that street stood a tiny bakery with fogged up windows and a door that creaked only when the clock neared midnight. The sign over the door was painted in chipped gold, and by daylight it seemed like any other sign. But under the moon it had a faint, warm glow, as if it remembered every loaf and roll it had ever watched being carried out into the world. Behind that door lived a baker named Ellen. Ellen had silver threads in her hair and flour dusting her sleeves. Her hands were steady and gentle, as if they had learned over many years that dough responds better to kindness than to haste. She moved quietly through the bakery, humming low songs that no one else knew, songs that seemed to rise with the steam. Every night, just before the town's clocks agreed that it was midnight, Ellen would light the lamps over the counter one by one. Their glow turned the little shop into a pocket of warmth pressed against the sleeping night. Outside, the street was still and dim, but inside, the wooden counters gleamed softly, and the glass jars of sugar and cinnamon waited like patient companions. The ovens, made of red brick, held onto the heat of the day like treasured memories. Ellen would open their iron doors and feel the breath of warmth on her face, comforting and familiar. It was at this hour, and only at this hour, that she made the midnight cinnamon rolls. The recipe for the midnight cinnamon rolls had never been written down. It lived in the way Ellen's fingers measured flour, in the way she tipped the milk bottle just so, in the timing of her pauses, when she listened to the dough. It lived in small acts of care and attention. She began with warm milk and a little cloud of yeast, watching as it bloomed to the surface of the bowl like tiny secrets rising to be heard. Butter melted slowly in a pan, filling the kitchen with a rich, quiet scent. The flour fell in soft mounds, and she turned it together with eggs and sugar until the dough became smooth and elastic, like the surface of a gently rippling pond. Around her, the bakery breathed. The wooden shelves, the mixing bowls, the sugar jars, all seemed at ease. The ticking clock on the wall slowed in the mind, each tick a calm footstep rather than a march. The world outside might be rushing somewhere, but in this little shop, time stretched and yawned and settled down. When the dough was ready, Ellen covered it with a clean cloth and let it rest. In that rest, the dough swelled and softened, and the air in the room grew subtly sweeter. There was no hurry. The night was long enough. The rolls would be ready when they were ready. While she waited, Ellen prepared the filling. She poured cinnamon into a small bowl, the powder rich and fragrant like the warm heart of winter. Brown sugar followed, sticky and plush, mixing with the spice until it smelled like comfort and childhood and afternoons spent watching snow fall through a window. She added a hint of vanilla, a breath of fragrance that slipped lightly into the air. There was a secret to these cinnamon rolls, but it was not some rare ingredient or complicated trick. The secret was that Ellen made them only at midnight, when the town was quiet enough to listen. She believed that dough could sense the mood in the room, that cinnamon could hold on to whispers and wishes. At midnight, when the world exhaled and the noise of the day faded into silence, her midnight cinnamon rolls could gather up the loose threads of worry and weave them into something softer. The dough rose under the cloth, plumping and stretching in the gentle warmth. When Ellen lifted the fabric, a puff of steam and scent greeted her, warm and yeasty and alive. She dusted the counter with flour and turned the dough out onto it, pressing it with her palms. It yielded kindly, patient, and pliable. With slow, even movements, she rolled the dough into a smooth, thin rectangle. The rolling pin glided back and forth, a quiet rhythm that matched the beating of a sleepy heart. Over this soft canvas, she spread melted butter until it gleamed, then sprinkled the cinnamon sugar in an even layer, the grains catching the light like tiny amber stars. when she began to roll the dough. She did it carefully, not too tight, not too loose. The cinnamon and sugar curled inside, forming spiral after spiral, like little galaxies sealed within. She cut each roll gently and placed them in a round pan, side by side, so that in the oven they would rise into each other and become something more than themselves. A warm, fragrant circle of comfort. As the rolls rested for a final time before baking, the town outside the bakery shifted quietly. A soft wind moved along the cobblestones, gathering fallen leaves and small secrets. The river in the distance whispered along its banks. A few windows still held a glow where someone read or wrote or simply sat awake with their thoughts. And some of those thoughts, the heavy ones, the tired ones, seemed to drift on that wind toward the little bakery like moths drawn to lamplight. There were always a few visitors who came to the bakery at this hour. The door was not locked, though it never swung open with haste. Instead, it opened slowly with the careful curiosity of someone who has stumbled upon a hidden place. The first visitor that night was Thomas, the town's night watchman. He had walked the same route for many years, boots steady on the cobblestones, lantern in hand. The rhythm of his footsteps had become the town's quiet heartbeat after dark. Thomas was not a man of many words, but his eyes carried the memories of countless nights, countless doors checked, countless stars glanced up at in the chill. He stepped into the bakery and closed the door behind him, leaving the faint echo of his lantern outside. Inside, the air wrapped around him in a warm embrace. He inhaled deeply, letting the scent of cinnamon and baking bread reach all the tired corners of his mind. Ellen greeted him with a small nod and a friendly smile. No one raised voices in the midnight bakery. Words were used sparingly, chosen with care, like the best ingredients. Thomas settled at the same little table where he always sat, near the window where he could just see the quiet town outside. A small bell jingled again, and the next visitor arrived. This was Mira, a young painter who often stayed up too late, her fingers stained with color. She lived in a tiny garret room nearby, where canvases leaned against the walls and jars of brushes crowded the windowsill. When her thoughts became tangled and the shapes on her canvas blurred, she came down the street, following the scent of cinnamon as if it were a path. Tonight, her eyes were heavy, but there was a restless light in them. She slipped into the bakery, the cool night remaining on her coat, and took a seat at another table. Her shoulders relaxed a little as she watched Ellen move around the kitchen, the simple, practiced motions soothing in their familiarity. The third visitor was an elderly woman named Leora, wrapped in a shawl knitted a long time ago. She walked slowly, but with a kind of quiet determination, like someone who has learned to move at her own pace in a world that often rushes. Leora had stories tucked into the lines of her face, and though she rarely told them aloud, they seemed to accompany her like patient companions. She chose the chair closest to the oven where the heat could warm her hands. Her gaze found the pan of cinnamon rolls waiting near the fire and softened as if the sight stirred some gentle memory. There were others who passed by the bakery without ever opening the door, sensing the comfort inside but not quite ready to step in. For them, the faint perfume of cinnamon that drifted through the keyhole was enough, like a promise that warmth and kindness still lingered somewhere in the night. When the rolls were ready for the oven, Ellen lifted the pan and slid it carefully into the warm brick chamber. The door closed with a comforting thud, and at once the scent began to deepen. Cinnamon and sugar melted and mingled, turning the air rich and velvety. The dough puffed and rose, edges touching, spirals expanding, tops turning golden and soft. In the quiet of the bakery, the tiny sounds of baking were like lullabies. The faint hiss of butter meeting hot metal, the gentle crackle as the sugar caramelized, the whisper of the oven's breath. Time slowed again, stretching in the warm glow. Thomas removed his hat and set it on the table. He let his hands rest, fingers uncurled. When he closed his eyes, he could still hear the soft clink of his lantern and the murmur of leaves outside. But now those sounds felt distant. The warmth of the room seeped into him, loosening the stiff joints, easing the weight of responsibility that came from watching over others while they slept. Mira cupped her hands around a mug of warm milk that Ellen had brought her. The smooth rim pressed against her palms, anchoring her. She watched the steam curl upward, tracing invisible shapes in the air. Her thoughts, once tangled in lines and colors and unfinished canvases, began to loosen. Ideas shifted gently, rearranging themselves in a kinder light. Leora simply breathed. Each inhale gathered the scent of baking cinnamon rolls, and each exhale carried away a little of whatever had made her chest feel tight earlier in the evening. She sat with her shawl wrapped snug around her shoulders, eyes half closed, letting the warmth and softness of the room hold her. Outside, the sky was clear. Stars pricked through the dark, small and steady. Somewhere within that vastness, the town and its midnight bakery were a quiet, glowing dot, a place where hearts remembered how to rest. When Ellen opened the oven, the wave of sweet, buttery air felt like a blessing. The rolls had risen perfectly. They nestled against each other, their spirals visible beneath glistening sugar, edges caramelized to a delicate golden brown. She carried the pan to the counter with careful hands, as if she held a tray of tiny moons just gathered from the night sky. She did not rush to serve them. Instead, she took a small brush and swept a cinnamon glaze over their tops, each stroke slow and mindful. The glaze seeped into the tender dough, pooling in the crevices, shining in the lamplight. For a moment, the whole bakery seemed to glow with them. As the rolls cooled just enough to be safely held, Ellen arranged them on small plates. She did not need to ask who wanted one. She knew. These were not ordinary pastries one ordered or declined. They were part of the night's gentle ritual, a shared warmth. One plate went to Thomas. When he lifted the roll, the bottom was just the slightest bit crisp, the top soft and yielding. A delicate spiral of steam rose into the air, carrying the fragrance of cinnamon, butter, and something else. It was as if the roll held a memory of every peaceful night he had ever known. When Thomas took his first bite, the outside gave way to a tender, pillowy center. The cinnamon sugar, melted into a glossy ribbon, touched his tongue with warmth. It was sweet, but not too sweet, comforting, but not heavy. As he chewed, something inside him eased, like a knot loosening. Mira received her roll on a plate with a napkin tucked carefully underneath. She tore off a small piece first, watching the steam curl from the soft interior. The flavor wrapped around her senses, shading her thoughts in tones of gold and amber. Her mind, which had been full of questions about what to paint and how to paint it, became quieter. She remembered that she painted not to impress anyone, but because there was a quiet joy in bringing color to emptiness. Leora's roll was placed before her with a small nod from Ellen. As she lifted it, her hands shook just a little, but the bread supported her fingers, warm and sturdy. With the first bite, she closed her eyes. It tasted like winter mornings from a long time ago, like families gathered close against the cold, like stories told in low voices while the kettle sang. For a moment, time folded gently, and she felt both younger and older, weighted with many years, and yet lightened by the comfort they had brought. There was a cat in the town, a soft, gray creature with pale eyes, who sometimes visited the bakery as well. No one knew exactly where the cat lived, or whether it belonged to anyone in particular. It simply appeared on certain nights, slipping in as the door opened for a customer, moving silently across the floor. Tonight, the cat padded in after Leora, tail curling in the air. It jumped gracefully onto a chair near the counter and tucked its paws beneath its chest. Ellen smiled and set down a small dish of cream, which the cat sniffed and then began to lap with slow, satisfied strokes. When it finished, it curled up, eyes half closed, as if listening to the quiet music of the bakery. The midnight cinnamon rolls had a way of tuning the room to the same calm frequency. Conversations, when they happened at all, were soft and unhurried. Thomas might share a small detail about the night, how the river mist had hugged the ground, or how the wind had carried a distant song from somewhere beyond the hills. Mira sometimes spoke about color, about the way moonlight turned rooftops silver, about the deep blue that gathered between the buildings. Leora offered memories like tiny lanterns, stories about the town when she was young, or about her grandmother who used to bake bread before dawn. Ellen listened more than she spoke. Her role was simple and sacred. She tended the dough, watched the ovens, refilled mugs of milk or tea, and let the midnight cinnamon rolls do their quiet work, because that was the true mystery of the rolls. As people ate them, whatever weighed heavily on their minds seemed to soften at the edges. Worries did not vanish, but they lost their sharpness. Regrets and fears became, for a little while, like distant shapes in a fog. The cinnamon warmth settled into the chest, and the sweetness reminded each visitor that comfort, however small, still existed. Outside the window, the street lamp cast a gentle circle of light on the cobblestones. A moth drifted lazily through it. The houses along the road slept peacefully, their chimneys quiet, their roofs silvered by starlight. Inside the bakery, breath by breath, the night grew softer. Sometimes new visitors found their way to the bakery, guided by nothing more than a hint of scent and a feeling that they needed to walk, to move, to find something, though they could not say what it was. On this night, a traveler named Rowan happened to pass through the town. Rowan had been moving from place to place for a long time, carrying a worn satchel and a notebook full of unfinished stories. Sleep often eluded Rowan. Thoughts swirled and looped. Pages stayed half-written, and the days sometimes blurred at the edges. When Rowan arrived in the town as evening tilted into night, the plan had been to stay just until morning, to rest for a little while, and then move on. But as midnight drew near, Rowan stepped out into the quiet street, hoping that the cool air might still the restless mind. The town felt gentle, safe in a way that needed no explanation. There was a softness to the shadows, a kindness in the way the wind rustled through the trees. Then the scent arrived, subtle at first, like a memory brushing past. Cinnamon, warm sugar, freshly baked bread. It curled around Rowan, inviting rather than demanding, and feet that had meant to wander aimlessly began to follow it, step by step down the cobblestones, until the little bakery came into view. The windows glowed softly. The door stood closed but not forbidding. Rowan paused only a moment before pushing it open and stepping inside. The warmth embraced the traveler at once. Rowan's shoulders dropped almost in surprise, as if they had forgotten how that felt. The others glanced up briefly and then back to their quiet thoughts, making room in the gentle silence for one more presence. Ellen greeted Rowan with the same small, welcoming nod she gave all who entered the midnight bakery. She placed a clean cup on the counter, filled it with warm milk, tinged with honey, and gestured toward an empty chair. Rowan sat, the satchel resting against the legs of the chair, and wrapped cold fingers around the cup. The first sip was simple and soothing, like the feeling of being wrapped in a soft blanket after a long journey. The baker moved with patient grace around the kitchen, and the scent of cinnamon lingered in the air, like a comforting thought that did not need to be finished. When Ellen brought a plate with a midnight cinnamon roll to Rowan, there was no speech, no explanation. There was only the quiet offering of something warm and kind, something that asked nothing in return. Rowan took a small bite. The dough was tender, almost cloud-like, yielding easily to teeth and tongue. The cinnamon sugar melted and spread, carrying warmth into every corner of the mouth, and then deeper into the chest, into the spaces that had felt restless and noisy. A long breath left Rowan's body almost soundless, almost surprised. The knot of thoughts that had been twisting and turning in the mind began to slow. There would be time another day for decisions about Where to go, what to write, how to carry the weight of untold stories, here and now, in this tiny bakery with its glowing windows and sleepy cat and gentle baker. There was only cinnamon and warmth and the soft hum of a clock that did not ask anyone to hurry. Gratitude settled over the room like a light blanket. No one said it aloud, but it was there, in the way Thomas sat a little straighter, less burdened, in the way Mira smiled faintly into her cup, an expression that hinted at new colors waiting on tomorrow's canvas, in the way Leora's eyes glistened, not with sadness, but with a quiet recognition of something dearly familiar. The cat, having finished its cream, stretched luxuriously and hopped down from the chair, making a slow circuit of the bakery. It brushed against Rowan's leg, then Thomas's boot, then Mira's calf, granting each of them a brief, gentle touch before settling back into its cozy place. Outside, the night moved onward, as it always did. The stars shifted almost imperceptibly. The river flowed on, unworried, bearing reflections of moon and lamplight across its surface. Inside, the bakery lingered in its own rhythm, a place apart from the rush of hours, suspended in a quiet glow. Ellen washed a few dishes in a small basin, the sound of water and porcelain, another soft note in the room's sleepy music. She set them on a cloth to dry, then wiped the counter in slow, even strokes. One by one, the plates that had held cinnamon rolls became empty, save for a crumb here and there. No one felt the need to hurry away. Instead, they allowed themselves the rare luxury of simply sitting, doing nothing at all, letting the warmth finish its gentle work. Eventually, Thomas rose. His night watch would continue until the sky began to pale, but now his steps would be lighter. He placed his hat back on his head and thanked Ellen with a quiet nod, his eyes conveying more than his words ever would. When he stepped out into the street, the night no longer felt like something to guard against. It felt like an old friend. Mira gathered her scarf and wrapped it around her neck. She knew that when she climbed the narrow stairs back to her garret, her canvases would be waiting. And for once, that thought did not feel heavy. It felt like an invitation. She thanked the baker softly, fingers touching the back of the chair in a small, affectionate tap, and slipped out into the starlight. Leora stood slowly, her joints protesting just a little, but not as fiercely as before. She had no grand plans for the morning. Perhaps she would sit by her window with a cup of tea and let the day pass gently. That felt like enough. She touched Ellen's arm in farewell, a small gesture full of shared history, then walked home at her own unhurried pace. Rowan remained a little longer, sitting with the empty plate and half-finished cup of warm milk. The traveler studied the soft light on the walls, the shadows of the chair legs, the sleeping cat. A sense of safety settled deep inside, like a stone finding its resting place at the bottom of a lake. When Rowan finally stood, it was with the feeling that movement was no longer an escape, but a choice. Whether the road continued in the morning or paused for another day, it would be met with a steadier heart. Rowan thanked Ellen quietly, and Ellen answered with a smile that said, without words, that anyone who needed the Midnight Bakery would find it again. As the visitors drifted back into the night, the bakery grew quieter. The chairs stood empty, the tables wiped clean. The lamps still glowed, but their light felt softer now, as if they too were beginning to tire. Ellen moved slowly through her closing ritual. She covered the remaining cinnamon rolls with a clean cloth, knowing that in the morning they would be gone, shared with those who greeted the day. She checked the oven, letting the last of the heat sigh out into the room. She arranged the jugs and jars, aligned the cups and plates. The cat leaped from its chair and padded to the door. It looked back once as if to say a silent good night, then slipped out into the street, melting into the folds of the sleeping town. The baker paused in the doorway that led to her small room in the back. She looked over the little shop, her little world, the wooden shelves, the quiet clock, the lingering curve of cinnamon in the air. This was not a grand place, not one that would be famous or celebrated, but it did not need to be. It was exactly enough. She turned down the lamps. Their glow dimmed, shadows lengthened, and the shapes of tables and chairs grew softer around the edges. Outside, the sign above the door lost its faint shimmer as the night moved on toward morning. The bakery rested. The town rested. The river flowed. The stars kept their silent watch. Far beyond the hills, beyond the slow river and the cobblestone streets, beyond the small town and its midnight bakery, other people lay down to sleep. Some had found comfort that day, and some had not. Some minds were calm, and some were crowded. But somewhere in the quiet spaces between thoughts, the idea of a warm, hidden bakery that opened only at midnight lived on like a gentle whisper. The memory of cinnamon and butter and soft, pillowy dough lingered in the air of the story. It carried the feeling of a place where no one had to rush, where worry loosened and softened and slipped away, if only for a little while. The night continued its slow turning. The sky would in time grow pale, the stars fading one by one. The river would catch the first hints of dawn and carry them along. Birds would wake and greet the day, and windows would open to let in the light. But for now, the world remained dim and hushed. A perfect moment for rest. Breath by breath, everything grew quieter. Breathing in, the body filled with calm. Breathing out, the body let go of what it no longer needed to hold. Breathing in, a sense of warmth. Breathing out, a sense of release. Thoughts like distant customers in a faraway bakery arrived and then drifted gently on. There was nothing that needed to be done with them. They could simply come and go like the scent of cinnamon in the night air, pleasant and soft, leaving only tranquility behind. The muscles in the face smoothed, the brow relaxed, the space around the eyes loosened. The jaw grew heavy and slack. The neck released its effort. Shoulders sank into support. Arms and hands rested heavily. The chest rose and fell with easy rhythm. The legs settled, weighty and peaceful. The feet felt far away, already drifting toward dreams. Around the sleeper, the night wrapped itself like a blanket, steady and sure. In that gentle darkness, the bakery with its midnight cinnamon rolls continued to exist, tucked safely into the folds of the story. Its ovens silent now, its tables empty, its lamps dim. Yet its warmth remained, ready to be remembered whenever comfort was needed again. There is nothing more to do, no place to go, no choices to make. Only this moment, quiet and soft. Let the mind grow hazy around the edges. Let the thoughts slow, like a river easing toward stillness. Let the body sink deeper, heavier, safe. The bakery door is closed for the night, the sign resting, the cat sleeping, the baker dreaming. The town around it is peaceful, and so are you, floating gently on the calm that the story leaves behind. Let your breath be slow. Let your sleep be deep. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.